listen to me for a moment. If you are getting older, or if you already feel the weight of it, what I'm about to say is not meant to frighten you. It's meant to interrupt something far more dangerous than fear: denial. There are harsh realities about old age that no one truly prepares you for. Not doctors who focus on numbers, not family who want to protect you, not society which worships youth and looks away from decline. So these truths are softened, postponed, or ignored altogether, because they force you to confront things we are trained to avoid: time running out, loss accumulating, limits closing in. But here's what almost no one tells you. Avoiding these truths doesn't make life easier. It quietly erodes your clarity, your agency, your ability to choose wisely. I'm not here to say you're only as old as you feel. That slogan comforts people who don't want to look closely. I'm here to talk about the realities that actually change how you live now, the ones that sharpen your priorities instead of dulling them, the ones that, if faced early enough, can save you years of regret. And if you stay with me until the end, you may recognize something most people only understand when time has already cornered them. Growing older is not the tragedy. The real tragedy is pretending you aren't. Reality number one: time is no longer abstract. At some point, time stops being something you plan with and becomes something you listen to. You feel it not as urgency, but as precision. Life no longer stretches endlessly forward. It begins to feel shaped, finite, and exact. You stop assuming there will always be another chance to return to things you postpone. Certain moments start carrying a quiet finality, even when nothing dramatic is happening. An ordinary goodbye lingers longer. A routine experience feels strangely complete, as if something is closing without ceremony. This isn't fear, it's awareness. When time was abstract, you could afford distraction. You could delay difficult conversations. You could live as if meaning would eventually organize itself. But once time becomes real, avoidance loses its appeal. You begin noticing how much of life is spent unconsciously. Hours dissolve into habits, days pass without leaving a trace, and that realization is sobering. Not because life feels shorter, but because it feels more valuable. Time stops being something you own. It becomes something you're entrusted with. This awareness doesn't make you rush, it makes you honest. You become more selective about where your attention goes. You feel a subtle resistance to anything that exists only to fill space. The tragedy is not that time is limited. It always was. The tragedy is living for years as if it weren't. Once time becomes concrete, life doesn't grow smaller. It concentrates, and from that concentration, a different way of living begins to take shape. One where each moment matters, not because it's rare, but because you are finally present enough to feel it. Reality number two: health becomes your foundation, not a side note. For most of your life, health feels invisible. It works quietly in the background while you focus on building, achieving, proving. You assume your body will keep up with whatever your mind decides. And for a long time it does, until one day it doesn't. Health doesn't collapse all at once. It shifts subtly. Sleep becomes unpredictable. Energy no longer resets overnight. Recovery takes longer than expected. Small discomforts begin to influence big decisions. And slowly something becomes clear. Your body is no longer a vehicle. It is the condition. Plans stop being abstract. They depend on how you feel that morning. Travel requires calculation. Even ordinary days are shaped by whether your body cooperates or resists. This is where many people struggle. They try to treat health as a problem to push through instead of a foundation to protect. They rely on discipline, optimism, or habit, hoping the body will obey the same rules it always has, but the body doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to attention. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Money loses meaning when pain limits movement. Ambition feels hollow when energy disappears. A positive mindset can't replace physical capacity. Health isn't everything. Until it's threatened, then it becomes the lens through which everything else is experienced. This realization doesn't make life smaller, it makes it more precise. You listen instead of override. You rest without guilt. You begin choosing sustainability over intensity, not because you've given up, but because you understand structure. Once health moves to the center, life reorganizes itself naturally. And from that honesty, a quieter strength emerges, one rooted not in pushing forward, but in staying whole enough to keep living fully. Reality. Number 3. Independence is fragile. For most of your life, independence feels permanent. You don't think about it. You move through the world assuming your body will respond, your balance will hold, your strength will be there when you need it. Independence feels like a fixed trait, something you've earned and therefore get to keep. Until one moment interrupts that assumption. It might be a fall that shouldn't have happened, a mistake you didn't see coming, a symptom you ignored because it felt inconvenient. And suddenly, independence reveals itself for what it really is: conditional. This realization doesn't arrive as panic, it arrives as awareness. You start noticing how quickly life could change with one wrong step or one bad decision. You become conscious of stares, of weather, of fatigue. You sense how thin the line is between managing your own life and needing help to do so. This is why aging teaches caution, not fear, not retreat, respect. Or you stop taking risks that no longer make sense. You choose stability over bravado, not because you've become fragile, but because you finally understand cost. Recovery isn't quick anymore. Consequences last longer. Independence, once compromised, is hard to rebuild. Freedom stops being something you assume will always be there. It becomes something you actively protect. You arrange your environment with more care. You move with intention instead of speed. You listen to warning signs instead of dismissing them. This shift doesn't make life smaller, it makes it deliberate. You're not withdrawing from life. You're learning how to stay inside it on your own terms for as long as possible. Independence may be fragile, but it is also valuable. And once you truly see that, you stop treating it lightly. You begin guarding it, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Reality number 4. Your mind will betray you sometimes. There comes a moment when your mind stops feeling invisible. You forget a name you've known for years. You walk into a room and lose the reason you went there. A word hovers just out of reach, and the pause feels heavier than it should. Nothing dramatic happens, but something shifts. A quiet question appears in the background of your thoughts. Is this normal? Or is this the beginning of something else? These moments don't just interrupt your day, they touch your confidence. You start paying closer attention to yourself. You replay conversations. You wonder if others noticed, even when they didn't. You begin to adjust. You double-check things that once felt automatic. You write reminders instead of relying on memory. You lean on routines, lists, and sometimes other people, not because you've failed, but because certainty no longer feels guaranteed. That dependence, even when small, humbles you. You realize your mind, like your body, has limits. That sharpness cannot always be summoned on demand. That speed is not the same as clarity. And while this realization can feel unsettling, it also slows you down in a way you didn't know you needed. You become more deliberate with your attention. You simplify choices. You stop flooding your mind with noise because you feel the cost more clearly now. This isn't the collapse people fear. It's a recalibration. Your mind may falter at times, but it also becomes more selective, less cluttered, more focused on what actually matters. You learn that you are not defined by perfect recall or constant sharpness. You are defined by awareness, adaptability, and the ability to remain present even when certainty slips. And that kind of presence carries its own quiet strength. Reality number 5, you will watch people disappear. At some point, people don't slowly drift out of your life anymore. They vanish. Friends you assumed would always be there. Neighbors whose routines quietly blended into yours. Sometimes even the person you built your days around. One absence follows another, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Death stops feeling rare. It stops feeling distant. It shows up in phone calls that change your tone before you answer. In empty chairs you don't move. In names that no longer get mentioned because saying them hurts too much. And with each loss, something settles in. Life is not renewable. There are no replacements waiting. No future version where everyone is still intact. What's gone doesn't circle back. What hurts most isn't the idea of death itself. That truth eventually becomes familiar. What hurts is everything that never found its moment. The conversation you assumed could wait. The gratitude you felt but never voiced clearly. The apology you rehearsed and postponed. You begin replaying ordinary moments, realizing how permanent they felt at the time. How casually you assumed presence was guaranteed. Loss sharpens you. You stop saving words for later. You become more direct, not because you're fearless, but because you understand how quickly later disappears. You show up differently with the people who remain, not clinging, not desperate, just more awake. Watching people disappear doesn't make you cold, it makes you precise. You learn to hold people with attention instead of assumption. You understand that every interaction is fragile, even when it feels routine. And once that truth sinks in, presence becomes something you offer deliberately, not out of fear, out of respect for how rare it truly is. Reality number 6. Relationships matter more than ever. There comes a point when relationships stop being optional scenery in your life. They become the structure. Earlier in life, connection often competes with ambition. You juggle people around goals, schedules, and obligations. Relationships adapt to your momentum. You assume there will always be time to catch up, to reconnect, to repair. That assumption fades. As time becomes more defined, relationships move to the center. Not because you need more people, but because you need what's real. Surface interactions lose their appeal. You notice when conversations feel empty. You notice when presence is divided. You notice who shows up without being asked. Impressing others no longer feels useful. You're less interested in how you appear and more interested in how it feels to be understood without explanation. Silence shared with the right person becomes more valuable than constant stimulation with the wrong ones. Time together feels heavier now, not heavier with obligation, but with meaning. An hour can feel complete. A short conversation can stay with you for days. You start recognizing that attention is not unlimited, and you become careful with where you place it. This awareness changes how you speak. You say important things sooner, not dramatically but honestly. You stop assuming the right moment will arrive later. At the same time, you let go of unnecessary conflict. Proving a point matters less than preserving connection. Relationships stop being about quantity. They become about alignment, about whether you can be yourself without shrinking or performing. When ambition loosens its grip, connection doesn't disappear, it clarifies. And in that clarity, relationships stop draining you. They begin grounding you, not because they complete you, but because they meet you where you already stand. Reality number 7. You stop accumulating and start letting go. There comes a moment when acquiring more stops feeling like progress. Not because you've lost desire, but because you've gained perspective. The things you once chased, objects, upgrades, collections, start to feel heavier than they used to. Not emotionally at first, but practically. They ask for space. They require care. They quietly demand attention you no longer want to give. You notice this shift in simple moments: a drawer you avoid opening, a shelf filled with items you no longer touch, a purchase that brings less satisfaction than it once did. You don't want more objects anymore. You want less weight. This isn't minimalism as a trend, it's clarity arriving naturally. You begin thinking about where things will end up and who will have to deal with them when you no longer can. You wonder what these belongings actually say about the life you've lived, and slowly letting go becomes intentional. You simplify not to erase your past, but to honor it. You keep what carries meaning. You release what exists only because you never questioned it. Empty space stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like relief. Letting go becomes an act of respect. Respect for your time, because you're no longer managing things that don't serve you. Respect for others, because you're not leaving behind unnecessary burden disguised as legacy. This process isn't about loss. It's about alignment. You're not reducing your life, you're refining it. And as you let go of what no longer fits, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter, not because you have less, but because what remains finally reflects who you are now. In the later chapters of life, freedom doesn't come from accumulation. It comes from choosing carefully what you're willing to carry forward. Reality number 8. End-of-life decisions are necessary, not morbid. There are conversations most people avoid for as long as possible, not because they're complicated, but because they feel final. Wills, medical wishes, decisions about care, limits, and dignity. We're taught that talking about these things is dark. The planning somehow invites the very outcome we fear. So we postpone. We tell ourselves there will be time later or that our loved ones will figure it out. But avoiding these decisions doesn't make death gentler, it makes it chaotic. When nothing is written down, others are forced to guess. Families disagree. Emotions collide with uncertainty. Decisions get made in moments of panic, not clarity. The people you care about most are left carrying questions instead of guidance. Planning is not giving up, it's taking responsibility. It's recognizing that love doesn't end with good intentions. Love includes preparation. It includes making things easier for those who will have to act when you no longer can. There is a quiet strength in deciding while you're still clear-headed, in naming what matters to you, in choosing how much intervention you want and when enough is enough. These decisions don't shrink your life, they often expand it, because once the unknown is addressed, it loses some of its weight. You're not planning for death, you're protecting the living, you're giving your family the gift of certainty in a moment that would otherwise be defined by confusion. You're choosing order over avoidance, clarity over silence. Facing these conversations isn't morbid, it's honest. And honesty, especially at this stage of life, has a way of bringing unexpected peace. Reality number 9, you see what really matters. At a certain point, many of the things you once fought over begin to lose their urgency. Arguments feel strangely hollow, not because you suddenly agree with everyone, but because you've lived long enough to see how little most disputes actually change. Being right stops offering the satisfaction it once did. You don't feel the same pull to defend every opinion or correct every misunderstanding, not out of indifference but out of perspective. You've already survived things that put these moments into scale. What once felt important now feels loud. You begin noticing how much energy is spent on proving, convincing, or competing, and something in you quietly withdraws from that effort. Not because you're tired in a physical sense, but because you finally understand cost. You've already lived through losses that didn't ask for your opinion. You've faced changes that couldn't be argued away. Compared to that, many conflicts reveal themselves as distractions. This is where wisdom starts to show itself. Not as superior knowledge, not as moral authority, but as restraint. You choose peace more often, not because you're passive, but because you're precise. You speak when it matters. You stay silent when it doesn't. You stop trying to win conversations that were never meant to lead anywhere. You begin valuing clarity over control, presence over performance. Wisdom isn't knowing more facts or having sharper arguments. It's needing less validation, less approval, less certainty from other people. You stop accumulating opinions the way you once accumulated achievements. You realize that life doesn't require constant commentary to be lived well. And once you see what truly matters, you protect it. Your time, your energy, your attention. Not because they're scarce, but because they're finally understood. Reality number 10. Gratitude becomes a skill, not a mood. Gratitude doesn't arrive automatically with age. In fact, the longer you live, the easier it becomes to lose it. You've seen too much. You've lost people. Your body doesn't cooperate the way it once did. Life gives you plenty of reasons to harden instead of soften. That's why gratitude at this stage is no longer a feeling you wait for. It's a skill you practice. Not because life has become easier. Not because things finally worked out. But because you're still here. You wake up and notice what's gone before you notice what remains. The silence feels heavier, the aches are familiar, the world moves faster than you do now. Gratitude doesn't appear naturally in moments like these. It has to be chosen. Not loudly, not performatively, quietly. You learn to recognize small mercies instead of grand victories. A morning without urgency. A body that still carries you, even imperfectly. A conversation that feels steady instead of rushed. Gratitude stops being about optimism. It becomes about honesty. You don't pretend life is fair. You don't deny loss. You simply acknowledge that something essential is still intact. Your ability to choose how you meet the day. That choice matters. Because bitterness grows when gratitude is passive. When you wait for life to earn your appreciation. Gratitude, practiced deliberately, interrupts that cycle. It keeps you from turning survival into resentment. At this stage, gratitude isn't a mood that comes and goes. It's a discipline, a way of staying present without becoming hardened, a way of saying, this is not perfect, but it is still mine. Still breathing, still choosing, still living the time that remains with intention rather than regret. Old age is not gentle, but it is honest. It doesn't flatter you or soften its message. It removes what no longer fits. It strips away illusions you once relied on, and in doing so, it clarifies what actually matters. Priorities become sharper, distractions lose their grip, presence stops being optional. You begin to understand that aging itself isn't the suffering. Resistance is. The people who struggle the most are not the ones who grow older. They are the ones who spend their energy fighting what is inevitable instead of learning how to live within it. They cling to former identities, former speeds, former expectations, and wonder why life feels so heavy. If you've recognized yourself in these realities, that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're awake. Awareness is not comforting, but it is powerful. And in the later chapters of life, it may be the only real advantage we get. It allows you to choose honesty over illusion, intention over habit, depth over distraction. If this conversation resonated with you, stay with me. The next one is not about what old age takes away, but what it quietly gives in return. Strengths that aren't visible, freedoms that don't announce themselves, forms of clarity that rarely get discussed. Because that part of aging, the part almost no one talks about, might change how you see everything that's still ahead.